In a game of Magic the Gathering, you, the player, are taking the role of a Planeswalker, an incredibly powerful mage that is capable of summoning monsters and casting spells to aid you in battle against other Planeswalkers. Now, they are also available, Planeswalkers that is, they are available as cards within the game. And when we summon a Planeswalker to our aid in a fight with another Planeswalker, in a duel with our opponent, what we're doing is effectively calling on someone of equal power level to ourselves. Now, in this case, they are oftentimes characters in the story of Magic the Gathering itself, and we're calling upon their aid, and they are loyal to help us for as long as we can keep their loyalty. So let's get into mechanically exactly how that works. Here I have an example. This is Elspeth Resplendent. This is a Planeswalker that came out in Streets of New Capenna. She has starting loyalty of 5. That is this little number in the bottom right corner. And what that means is when she enters the battlefield, we put 5 counters on her. So she enters the battlefield, we put 5 counters on her, and then we can interact with those loyalty counters in a number of different ways. You'll also notice the casting cost is like any other Magic card. Elspeth, in this case, enters the battlefield for 3 white. We cast it as a spell. That means it can be countered. And once it's on the battlefield, it is considered, Elspeth is considered a permanent, even though Planeswalkers are technically, similar power level to the player if you get into the story of it all. But what do we have to do, or what can the Planeswalker do once it hits the field? You'll notice we have a lot of text on here, and compared to other Magic cards, it may not be exactly intuitive. Well, Planeswalkers come with a suite of loyalty abilities, and in any given turn, you, the player who controls the Planeswalker, on your main phase, at the same casting speed as a sorcery or any creature spell that does not have flash, you will have the ability to activate one of those loyalty abilities. So you get it once per turn. If the Planeswalker survives till your next turn, you get to choose the same one again or choose a different one. And you modify the number of loyalty counters on the Planeswalker equal to the icon to the left of the chosen ability. So in the case of Elspeth Resplendent, we have 3 loyalty abilities. Some Planeswalkers have 2, some Planeswalkers have 1, some Planeswalkers have 4. Many of them have 3. That is not uncommon. But in the case of Elspeth, she has a +1 ability, so we can add a loyalty counter, bringing her loyalty up to 6 on the first turn. To choose up to 1 target creature, put a +1/+1 counter on and a counter from among flying, first strike, lifelink, or vigilance onto it. So what we do is we can activate Elspeth +1. She effectively casts a spell, if you will. It's considered an ability for the purposes of the game, but she buffs up one of our creatures in a cool way by adding counters to them. We also have a -3 ability. Look at the top 7 cards of your library. You may put a permanent card with mana value 3 or less from among them onto the battlefield with a shield counter on it. Put the rest of on the bottom of your library in a random order. You will notice effects that negatively reduce the loyalty counters are significantly more powerful than the ones that add loyalty counters generally. That is not uncommon because we want to add loyalty counters, because the way that a Planeswalker is destroyed is by their loyalty counters being reduced to 0. Their loyalty counters are effectively their life total for the purposes of the gameplay. And those loyalty counters can be modified or can be attacked, well, literally, as well as through other means. The loyalty counters can be reduced through effects like damage. So spells like Shock, for example, that deal 2 damage to any target. One of those targets can be a Planeswalker. So in the case of Elspeth Resplendent, she comes in with 5 loyalty. If we immediately downtick or remove 3 loyalty counters, our opponent can then shock Elspeth. We still get the effect of the -3 ability. However, our Planeswalker is gone, meaning we will not be able to activate her again, and we spent 5 mana for that effect. So we have to ask ourselves, is it worth it in that situation? The other thing that can happen with Planeswalker loyalty abilities or Planeswalker loyalty totals, players can choose to attack Planeswalkers directly with creatures. When you are choosing your attackers, if you are choosing to attack with creatures, you can choose to either attack your opponent's life total, which happens 90 to 95% of the time, but you can also choose to aim those creatures at Planeswalkers. And if they connect with the Planeswalker, because the defending player has an opportunity to block them just like they could if they were going at their life total. The defending player has an opportunity to block those. If they choose not to, or if they are unable to, and the Planeswalker takes damage that lowers their loyalty counters to 0 or below, well, it will lower it to 0. The Planeswalker it goes to the graveyard. It is destroyed. So that is something to take into consideration. When you are playing a Planeswalker card, be aware of the state of the board. If your opponent has creatures on board and you do not, there is a high likelihood that the Planeswalker is not going to survive the following turn. Be aware of that and ask yourself, is the effect that this Planeswalker has, if it does not survive, is that worth the mana investment? If the answer is yes, run out your Planeswalker, do the thing. If the answer is no, hold it back, wait for conditions to improve, and find some other way to destroy those creatures or create a board state of your own through creatures that can block for that Planeswalker, and find those situations. The other value that you get from Planeswalkers is they prevent damage from going to your life total. If an opponent chooses to attack 4 power worth of creatures at a Planeswalker to destroy it, that's 4 damage that does not go against your life total that turn. Be aware of that when you are assessing whether or not to play out a Planeswalker, except that part of the Planeswalker's role is to take some hits for you and prevent damage to your life total. Depending on the state of the game, depending on what you're building into, that may be enough value to merit putting a Planeswalker into play. So keep that in mind. So this has been a quick primer of how Planeswalkers work. We did use Elspeth Resplendent as an example. One other note that I'd like to make, Elspeth Resplendent is a classic Planeswalker design in that she has a plus ability, a negative ability that is better than the plus ability, but lowers the loyalty, making her easier to destroy. And then she also has what's often referred to as an ultimate ability. If you refer to someone, or if you hear someone refer to ulting a Planeswalker or hitting the ultimate ability of a Planeswalker, they are referring to a negative ability that has a number higher than the Planeswalker's starting loyalty. That is often something that needs to be built into and is oftentimes a game-ending scenario. In the case of Elspeth Resplendent, if we get her to 7 loyalty, we can take 7 loyalty counters off of her, in some cases, depending on the scenario, destroying her right away just by activating that ability. But for our effort, we get 5 3/3 White Angel creature tokens with flying. Now, this has actually taken some criticism as being an ultimate that is fine and not particularly impressive. It does put 15 flying power on the board that your opponent then has to answer. In many games, that is good enough to close it out. Other games, not so much, but that is important to note and just something to be aware of. There are other Planeswalkers with much more powerful ultimates that are capable of just ending the game on the spot effectively. And so I encourage you to look up some other Planeswalkers and find some other abilities out there. If there are specific Planeswalkers that you maybe have in your collection and you are curious how to build around them, please let me know in the comments below. I would love to engage with you and see what Planeswalkers you are intrigued by. Planeswalkers also sometimes have passive abilities and they function like enchantments, which is kind of an interesting way, but those are very intuitive. The card kind of explains exactly what they do. In the case of loyalty abilities, not so much. So I definitely wanted to focus on that for today. So thank you so much for checking out this video, and thank you for making it to the end. I appreciate it very, very much. If you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe, and you can expect to see more videos like this in the future. Thank you so much. Catch you on the next one.